All right, let's wait a few minutes before let some people come in.
Yeah, absolutely.
Started.
We are at the top of the hour, so we'll just give everyone a minute to trickle in before we get started. But for those that are trickling in, here's something to think about while we wait for everyone else to join us. And that is, when did you last check your Salesforce installed packages and make sure that they were up to date? Because that's what we're going to talk about today. And I think it's a really interesting question. Mike's got loads of great information for us shortly. But maybe just have a think about your own org. And when was the last time you had a little look at those installed packages? I see a few more people are joining us. Well, why don't we go ahead and do some introductions, Mike?
Yeah, let's do that.
So thrilled to be hosting with Mike today on Are We Even Using These Apps? How to Perform an Audit on Your Installed Packages. My name is Christine Marshall. I'm the Technical Content Director at Salesforce Ben, and I'm thrilled to be here with Mike Bogan from Hubbl Diagnostics. Over to you, Mike.
Yeah, for sure. I'll give a little background on myself. So for those of you that don't know me, I've been in the ecosystem for over 11 years now. I joined a consulting partner, Traction on Demand, helped grow that partner from about 20 people up into a platinum partner before we were acquired by Salesforce in 2022. And in that time, worked with all kinds of customers. Really narrowed in on sales engineering, solution engineering. Was the first solution engineer at Traction on Demand and helped scale out that team. And along the way, was able to do a lot of amazing projects with a lot of different customers. But at the tail end, started moving into R&D and innovation, worked really closely with Salesforce themselves. And one of my favorite projects was actually working with the sustainability team at Salesforce in the very early days with Shyamwa Su. So Shyamwa Su and myself built the first version of carbon footprinting on the Salesforce platform that was used for the 2018 calculations that Salesforce reported. And that then turned into Sustainability Cloud, now net zero, and awarded us a 2019 Partner Innovation Award. So that was a lot of fun. And that was a really interesting crash between my backgrounds. So I spent 10 years prior to being in the Salesforce ecosystem with the US Department of Energy. So I worked at Lawrence Livermore National Laboratory. So that's the lab where you've seen all these fusion experiments that are happening. I also worked at the SLAC National Accelerator Laboratory at Stanford University. And back then, 20 years, around 2004, we were doing machine learning and neural network experiments of national security importance that basically changed my view into how we could use technology. And that's actually part of the basis of what's actually happening with the machine learning inside of Hubbl Diagnostics. So what are we going to talk about today? So I want to start off talking about Benioff, actually, and some of his newest obsession with metadata. And metadata is a term that you may have seen or may not have seen, depending on how long you've been in the ecosystem. But there's a really important concept in metadata called namespaced metadata that we'll cover. And that'll get us into a topic that Christine was alluding to around installed package neglect, why we should actually care about this, and then we can start thinking about how we can automatically monitor our orgs and get a bit more efficient using technology. So, like I said, I've been in the ecosystem for a long time, and one of my habits is to actually attend the Salesforce earnings calls. And I noticed something in the most recent earnings call. So Mark Benioff, he kept talking about metadata. And I just thought this was really strange. And so much so that I actually went back and did a little experiment and went back and ran through the transcripts from the earnings calls from Salesforce back into about 2018. And what I found is that the word metadata had only been mentioned 5 times in earnings calls. And this is, I mean, pretty incredible. This is an earnings call with analysts, like business analysts looking at investor analysts looking at Salesforce as an investment. And all of a sudden, in the last earnings call in February, Mark Benioff mentioned metadata 26 times. I mean, this was a complete outlier, just something very different. And what also caught me was that Fortune had run an article talking about Benioff being, doing a tirade about AI and how AI was unique at Salesforce and the way they were doing it. But when I looked at through this lens, I would actually argue the tirade was actually about metadata and not AI alone. Because if you look at the use of AI across all of these earnings calls, AI has been deep and rich throughout these earning calls for many, many years, as we all know, things like Einstein coming in. And there's reason for this too, because there's a lot of metadata inside of a Salesforce org. And so what is metadata? What are we talking? We're talking about the way that your Salesforce org is configured. So think about even the most basic things, the objects, the fields that are on those objects, all the way to the custom code that's running underneath. And that's the concept of metadata inside of Salesforce. Now, 24,000 pieces of metadata in the average org. It's a big number. But let's put it into perspective. What if you went into setup in Salesforce and clicked on and looked at all the metadata in the org? If you went into setup and looked at every piece of metadata for 5 seconds, it would take you 4 days of continuous clicking to go through the entire org. And that's just an incredible number. Nobody can do it. Nobody has the time to do it. And so people don't do it naturally. Because there's a lot of things that needs to be done, and this is where you want to take advantage of tools, products, platforms that allow you to automate and understand what's happening with all that metadata in your org. So now I want to shift into this concept of namespaced metadata. So there's a special flavor of metadata called namespaced, and why should you actually care about namespaced metadata? Well, basically 25% of your orgs are typically namespace metadata. And this is an important concept because you need to understand how your org is configured and where it's coming from so that you can best manage it. So let's look at an example of this. So when you purchase your licenses at Salesforce, you get access to a set of objects, and those objects and that functionality allows you to build your business. I like to think of Salesforce as like a business printer where you're signing up for these licenses, you get access to some functionality, and those make your core objects. And those core objects, the way it works is basically Salesforce has data centers all over the world, and you're living in a multi-tenant architecture of those objects that you're sharing with everyone else in the ecosystem. So a simple example is the contact object, right? Everyone's got the contact object in their org. And when you look at that object in your org, there's the source is Salesforce. It has no prefixes in the name and no suffixes in the name. So the API name, the so-called API name, is just contact itself. Now, if you went into your org and created a custom object, like many people do, and you called it contact, when you create that object, it doesn't get a prefix, but it'll have a suffix after it, that _C. So when you're digging through your orgs, you can see those custom objects. They stand out from the standard objects with those _Cs. Now, I'm not recommending that you go and make a contact object in your org that's custom, but if you did, this is what it would look like in terms of notation. Now, let's get to namespace. So namespaced custom object. If you had a namespace custom object in your org that was called contact, it was coming from an installed package, and it has this alphanumeric __ prefix at the beginning that makes it stand out from the custom objects that you're creating. And so you can see this example of just A, B, C, D as an example of a prefix. Other examples, we have an AppExchange app called Hubbl Process Analytics. It has HPA as its prefix. And so you can see how when you're digging through your org and looking through setup, you would have different types of metadata, some namespaced, some not, some coming directly from Salesforce itself. But wait a minute, what are these installed packages that we're talking about here? So where does this namespaced metadata actually come from? Well, if you've been around an ecosystem for a while, you've definitely heard of the AppExchange. AppExchange was born in 2006. This is some content Salesforce released in the celebration of 10 years. There's over 10 million installs by 2022. Extremely powerful, innovative platform that's accelerated businesses all over the world. And a really important point here is that AppExchange apps themselves are security reviewed. There's over 7,000 of them available, and 91% of customers have installed at least one of these apps. In my days at Traction on Demand, we built multiple AppExchange apps as a company, launched those on the AppExchange, and we even launched companies based on those products on the AppExchange. And so extremely powerful tool. Almost everyone uses it. And Salesforce does a great job of getting those apps security reviewed and secure for your applications. But there's another type of install package, and it's called a private listing. And so and Salesforce even warns, I mean, these are not security reviewed packages. So Salesforce warns private listing do not go through security review, and administrators should inspect the application carefully before determining whether it should be installed within their organization. So this is something that Salesforce is passing on to you in your management of your org. And this is a really important point to learn as you're managing your orgs, because anyone who has a Salesforce org can create an installed package. They can create a package, and that package, then they create a URL that they can share with you that you can then install in your org. And that means that that code is inside of your org, and it has not been security reviewed. Now, there's a few other things you should know about packages. There's different types. There's managed, unmanaged, unlocked packages. So if we just look at the managed packages, they're namespaced. They require a security review if they're on the AppExchange. They can have upgrades pushed to them, and you don't get access to the code. So what this means is that package is in your org. You don't have access to the code. You won't be able to see what it's doing. You'll just be able to leverage its capabilities. Unmanaged packages, they're not namespaced. They don't need to be security reviewed. They don't get upgrades, and you do have access to the code itself. Whereas unlocked packages are namespaced, that security review is optional again, and they can get upgrades, and you do have access to the code. So what does this mean for you? You need to always confirm that the risks of these installed packages don't outweigh the rewards that you're getting in terms of functionality. When you're dealing with packages, you want to ensure that you have the latest versions of these packages. Some have upgrades that can be pushed to them, some don't. And then no matter what, in the scenarios where you have access to the code, you want to empower yourself to understand and identify any risky issues with them. Salesforce tells you to do this. They tell you to analyze these packages and get an understanding of what's happening inside of them. So there's one other piece, though, and that is that we don't often talk about versions, right? This is a scenario where the publishers can update these packages over time. And what we have found in research we've been doing over the years, so our product looks across all the orgs that we've scanned in the ecosystem. And what we've found is that 99% of Salesforce orgs in the ecosystem have out-of-date installed packages. So what that means is that we've detected that there's a newer version of the package available in the ecosystem than the version that you have inside of your org. And on average, there's about 14 packages that are out of date per org in the ecosystem. Another thing that's interesting is if you look back at that table, about over 30% of the packages are not security reviewed that are in these Salesforce orgs. So definitely a lot of work for people to do to get an understanding of what's happening here. And this is information coming from our benchmark report that we publish annually. So let's do some real talk. So why is it so hard to keep these up to date, and why is this actually happening? And you know, this finding surprised me because I've been in the ecosystem a long time. I had seen that packages were out of date. Sometimes there's reasons people want to keep them out of date or not. But when I started thinking about this, it really became very clear. We all run our lives on these devices. These devices tell us, we install apps in them, and these devices tell us when the apps are out of date. We've all been moving our business to the cloud for over 20 years now. We've started installing apps into our business. And for almost 20 years, there has never been an automated mechanism to tell you whether the apps that you've installed in your business are out of date. And this is just, you know, Salesforce doesn't tell you inside of setup. It's not available from the AppExchange. So what's happening is that there's a lot of installed package neglect is the way to think about it. And so what are the consequences of this? There's a few things. So you could have security vulnerabilities because your packages are not out of date or not up to date. And one of the top recommendations to being cyber safe is to update your apps, right? It's just the most basic concept. Speed. So there's old legacy automation inside the Salesforce ecosystem with Salesforce's innovations from workflow to process builder up now into flow. And then obviously the Apex triggers. There could be scenarios where your org could be operating more slowly than it needs to be. And you could just be missing features. This is pretty simple. If you don't upgrade the app, there might be features from the publisher that you might have available to you that you could be leveraging. Now, what if you wanted to actually go in right now into your org and determine whether your packages are out of date? So you'd have to do this manually, and you go into setup, you check out your installed packages, you need to look for the publisher and the version number that's available. And then you have to go to the AppExchange, type in that or copy that name of that package, search for it, find the package name, and then you need to navigate to more details. And in more details, you can see the version numbers that are there. But what's amazing about this is that those version numbers are manually updated by the publishers. And so because they're manually updated, they're not always up to date, and they're not always the most recent version number. So even if you went through and did that manual effort, and some orgs have over 100 packages in them, so it could take you a very long time to go through and do this, you may not even come up with the most recent versions of those packages. And remember, there's different types of packages. So those are for packages that are from the AppExchange. You could actually go check it out. But if you have privately listed apps in your org that are not from the AppExchange, you would need to contact the publisher. Maybe you received email notifications that have gone into your spam folder in your email inbox and have been ignored, or maybe someone else from the organization 5 years ago installed the apps, and now those notifications are going to someone else. You don't actually get them. Pretty much you're out of luck. You need to contact that publisher, or you won't be able to identify those new versions available. And that's obviously why we're here today and why we're what we've been tackling with Hubbl Diagnostics. So Hubbl Diagnostics and our process analytics, what we're doing is we're basically setting the standard for Salesforce success across the ecosystem. We look at the metadata inside of Salesforce org and use that to drive performance, health, and adoption across the entire org. We analyze the processes inside your org. So think about that scenario where you're doing a business process workshop and you're mapping out with all of your stakeholders the process that's actually happening in their business. What process analytics does is it actually gives you a data-driven view of those processes for the first time inside of Salesforce. So you can actually empower those workshops with real data from your org in minutes. That metadata analysis from diagnostics allows us to basically classify all of that metadata and use machine learning to create recommendations that allow you to take action. And we do that through a lens of security. And most importantly, we do this in a scenario from a benchmarking perspective. So we benchmark the org that you're analyzing against itself. We benchmark it against industry standards, and we also benchmark it across all the orgs that have ever been analyzed by Hubbl Diagnostics. And that allows you to get a completely unique view of what's happening inside of your org. All right. So what I want to do is I'm going to actually just switch over and jump into the product for a second, give you a sense of how Hubbl Diagnostics looks and feels.
Yeah, this is a great time to say as well, don't forget, put any questions in the chat as well about anything that Mike's covered or is going to cover, and we'll answer them as we go. And there'll also be another opportunity at the end to ask any more questions.
All right, so Hubbl Diagnostics is essentially, this is an app where you are creating a user in a portal that allows you to connect to Salesforce orgs and perform an analysis of that Salesforce org. And so the way the results, once you analyze the org, it takes a couple minutes to create your account and analyze an org. Once the analysis runs, then you get access to a set of results that are organized across a series of tabs. And you can see one of the things we're trying to do is make it so that, like I mentioned, there's 24,000 pieces of metadata in an org. We're trying to make it so that you can communicate what's happening inside of your org and accelerate your team. Here today, I'm not going to be able to cover all the capabilities inside of Hubbl, obviously, but we're talking about packages today and this concept of, are we actually even using these apps? So we've seen that packages are out of date. You're taking over an org. Oftentimes you're trying to figure out, hey, are we even using these apps that are inside of this org? If we find out whether they're security reviewed or out of date, regardless, we just need to understand, are we using them? And so on the packages tab here, what you can see is we do a breakdown of how those apps are being used. For the object-driven apps, it shows you the number of records that are in each of those packages. So you get a sense of which are the apps that are being used the most. And then we get a breakdown of all of the apps in your org, the packages that are the total number of packages, the ones that are out of date, the ones that aren't security reviewed, deprecated, password protected, and more. And then down below, you get that full list view of all of your packages. And this is where things get really interesting, because what we're doing is you can see we can see our packages that are out of date. And that's where we're looking at the version numbers that are detected across all the orgs that have been scanned in the Hubbl ecosystem. And now you can see whether there's new versions available for you. So this allows you to identify those apps that you should investigate, reach out to the publisher, understand what's the new features are that are available for you. But you can also see packages that are not security reviewed in the org. And this is a critical piece for you to investigate as well. Now, if you want to dig deeper into a package, you want to understand, hey, how, are we using this app? This was something that was installed by someone else? I need to understand how the organization is using this particular package. Then you can dig into individual packages. And here you get those high-level KPIs of what's in the package, but you also see how the package itself is being used. So you get the empty fields that are in that package, the number of unused objects. So you may have installed a package that has a huge number of objects. You're only using a small part of it. That means there might be opportunity for you to leverage that package more and take advantage of capabilities that are delivered from this package that's in your org. And you can also see the number of records in the package itself. So this is for each object in the package, and we show you the last time a record was updated as well. So this helps you understand, is this package being used recently or not? And then over in field utilization, this is giving you a breakdown of the number of times a record for that particular object has a value filled in for this particular field. And this is an extremely powerful tool to let you understand how those packages are being used. And it's interesting because field utilization, it's not just targeting the packages themselves. So what we're doing with Hubbl is, like I said, it takes you a couple minutes to run a scan, but you get field utilization is being run across all of the objects in the org, all custom and standard objects. And with about 2 minutes of effort, you can see all of the field utilization across all your objects in your org and quickly navigate between those. And this is just a huge time saver for people that are digging into the orgs themselves. And a standard feature in terms of the way we're doing this is you can also filter all these. So maybe just show me all the custom fields. And since we're talking about namespaced and not namespaced, I can look at things that are not namespaced, for example. So these are all the custom fields. And you remember that notation I was talking about earlier, you can see the double underscore C's here with these custom objects. Out of all the records in this org, these ones don't have any values in them, so definitely something that we would want to explore for being removed from the org.
We've had a quick question for you, Mike, if that's okay. Someone has asked, is there a way to export the results on the specific screen on Hubbl? So for example, seeing the details of the package scan, but then exporting that information out of Hubbl.
Yeah, that's a great question. So you can see up top, we have export to CSV. So what this does is it actually creates a zip file of all of the metadata that you're seeing in these visualizations and more. So there's even more metadata that's in the CSV export than what we've shown in all of these tabs here. We're continually creating new visualizations that our customers are asking for, and we're developing internally. So that's another way to dig through all of these results as well. All right, so that gives you a sense of packages, digging into those packages, and how you can leverage Hubbl to identify whether you're using those packages or not, and how you would even dig into those. Another thing I want to point out too is on this summary screen, this concept of migration to flow. So we actually gamify the migration to flow, and we do this through a capability that is allowing you to actually automatically calculate the modernization ROI in your migration to flow. So this is a scenario where Salesforce's older innovations of workflow and process builder, they're running slower, 150, 20 milliseconds slower than before save flows and triggers. And so what we're doing in Hubbl is we're actually automatically calculating the amount of lost productivity in your org based on that older legacy automation in your org. And this is really powerful, because what I've found in conversations is customers they're being told that they need to migrate to flow. Then their executives are like, well, why do we need to migrate to flow? I don't want to spend time on this. And then admins will go, well, it's slow. Salesforce told me it's slower. And then they'll say, how much slower? And they'll say 150 milliseconds. And then the executives will be like, what are you talking about? This doesn't make any sense. It's not, it doesn't really matter. But when you add that up across the entire year, and you look across the number of records and the number of workflows and process builders you have working in Salesforce, this can actually add up into full-time equivalents. And so there is true ROI in making this modernization effort, and you can get that visualization inside of Hubbl, even from the free version of the product. And what you can do is you can also track this over time. So this green bar here shows you the percentage of flow that you have in your org compared to the average in the ecosystem. So this even allows you to see how you're benchmarking against everyone else, and make the argument that we're behind everyone else, our competitors. Let's get moving. And then you can track that over time. Like I said, Hubble's a monitoring platform. So each one of these dots is a different scan showing a migration off of the workflows in the org. Process Builder hasn't been tackled yet, and it's a really easy way to track the progress and communicate effort that's being done there. And this is important from the app perspective, because the apps themselves contain a significant amount of the legacy automation in these orgs, especially those ones that you haven't updated. Oftentimes there's scenarios where you'd be able to take advantage of the new capabilities in those apps. All right. A really important one to go through is this concept of security. So we talked about orgs that are, or apps that are not security reviewed. And what we can do here is we can show you, there's actually, Hubbl, we're taking this from a security perspective. Like I said, been in the ecosystem for over 11 years. We want to make sure the entire ecosystem is raised to a security standard. And so what we're doing is we're providing every single customer in the Salesforce ecosystem a free security scan. And so what this is you see a view of an executive level view of the results of the Salesforce Code Analyzer. So this donut chart showing you right now the security slice. And then over here, you're seeing the frequency of violations that have been identified by that security analysis by the Code Analyzer. And this is really important for all you click-to-code admins, Salesforce product owners who are taking over an org. Maybe you're managing the org, you're working with consultants or subcontractors. You may not know the depths of the custom code that is being built in the org. You may not understand how and why these errors may be appearing, but you do need to understand, and you may be responsible for understanding the security in the org. And this is a great free way to understand, track, and monitor the custom code in your org. And you can see here what we show you is the gray ones here are custom code that's been built in the org itself versus namespaced custom code that is causing issues as well. And so you get that slice of whether it's coming from installed packages or not. And this allows you to get the view of all the custom code in your org, as well as the line item issues that are coming from that particular piece of code. And if we look at that inside of the product, we can see there's a couple other things you can see here. So we even show you the old API versions in the org as well. Salesforce is always releasing new releases, and those old API versions new API versions come out with each release, and it's important to keep track of all of the versions that are in your particular org. And so when you can see when you dig into the security slice on these orgs, you end up getting these line items that allow you to identify the issues that are in there. But what's most important is that you don't need to understand, like I said, you don't need to understand the depths of all of these issues. What we do is we are running scoring thresholds across all the metadata, and that allows us to identify the issues in the org and provide you recommendations that are given to you and ranked by the severity of the issue and the level of effort to address them. And so this is critical because this actually gives you a prioritized roadmap of how to tackle the issues inside of your org. And this is beyond this will do things like identify those packages that are out of date. Give you recommendations about finding SOQL injection code in your custom code. Things like the FBI has put out a release back in March around digging in your org. But even simple opportunistic type things like we look at all the pick lists in your org and identify scenarios where you could be using global pick lists in the org. You'll get all of those recommendations through your analysis of an org with Hubbl. And that type of view into your org allows you to monitor and track that org over time. So you get your priority matrix, you get your personalized roadmap, you start executing against it, and then what you do is you track that over time. And so you get this proactive monitoring where you can track the health of the org. And here's a customer who identified some high security issues or high severity issues, worked together with their consultant or their internal team to resolve those. And then over time, each one of these dots being a new monitoring allows you to see a scenario where now you're proactively monitoring. You see recommendations that are going up. And so that scenario where recommendations are going up, we allow you to dig in with the issues lifecycle, see these new recommendations. Once you dig into those new recommendations, you can see, in this case, it's pretty benign. There's some API versions that have gotten a bit older because of the new release. And then some reports were created that don't have descriptions. But you can see how you can proactively monitor this. And if you're working with your team to monitor the health of your org over time, this helps you keep on top of issues that might be popping up and get a bit more proactive. Now, a lot of you, in fact, almost everyone lives in a multi-org environment. So you have your production instance, and then you have your sandboxes down below as well. And then there's businesses that are living in a multi-org environment where your company may have acquired another company, and now you're managing multiple orgs. It gets to the scenario where there's 20, over 100 orgs inside of an organization. So what we've done here is we've actually created a multi-org monitoring view where you can actually track the health and issues across all of your orgs in a single view to give you a true management platform to address those issues. So overall, bringing it back to where we started, if you got 24,000 pieces of metadata in a single org, and it takes you 4 days just to look at everything in that one org, you can imagine if you did that once per month, it would take you 10 weeks of continuous clicking just to go through setup in this. Manually collating the types of results you see inside of Hubbl, including the visualizations and everything that are in there, the machine learning that lies underneath. It would take you weeks per scan. So Hubbl reduces that effort to about a minute in terms of creating your account and initiating your scans. And then your overall productivity gains are absolutely massive. So that allows you to do your automated audits, get proprietary recommendations, and just improve the communication across the team to overall build the good. And so if you're interested in getting started, you can just grab an account at hubbl.com/signup, or you can just literally just go to the Hubbl website itself. Hubbl is it's not an app that is installed from the AppExchange. you actually just click on Get Started on the website, and that allows you to create your account there. And so with that, I'll summarize by, I think, one takeaway I just want to convey one more time is that those installed packages that are in your org, they're incredible at maximizing the value of your Salesforce investment, but it's definitely something that requires proper maintenance and something that you should be investigating a bit deeper to avoid any unintended risks inside of your org. And with that, let's open up for questions and answers. Definitely appreciate your time.
So I have a question for you, Mike, if that's okay. Does Hubbl Diagnostics have any tools or features that could help with user engagement tracking? I know we talked a lot about speed and what's out of date, but yeah, user engagement.
That's a great question. So one of the things that we're doing is I showed you a lot of stuff around the ability to dig into an org, get recommendations for specific issues. But one of the things that we're doing, and this really came from my efforts doing pre-sales and solution engineering. I've always wanted a view of how is this org actually being used? And by being used, I mean from the native perspective. So this is our org utilization tab. So what it's doing from an adoption perspective is showing you how the org is actually be used from the native objects in the cloud that you have purchased. So these are the records that are in the native objects in Sales Cloud, Service Cloud, and the other clouds that are in here. This is a demo org, so it has a ton of clouds in here. And then over here, it's showing you the percentage of the objects in the cloud that are actually being utilized. So this gets you an understanding, you've purchased certain licenses, you're utilizing parts of Service Cloud, but you may not be using all of it. You may have other native capabilities that you've already purchased that you could be taking advantage of. Down below, we show you the object usage capabilities. This is breaking down all the records for specific objects. So if I dig into Service Cloud, now I can see how that particular cloud is being used. And when you do this from org to org and you start getting an understanding of how Service Cloud is being used across different orgs, then you start getting an understanding of how you could be leveraging Service Cloud in different ways. And so here you can see there's a big knowledge base here. They're obviously leveraging cases. They have some service presence going, but they're not leveraging some of the other capabilities in Service Cloud. And this actually gets to an important point about how we are looking at this through a benchmarking lens as well. So because we're looking across all the orgs that have ever been scanned, we're also doing benchmarking across how each of the clouds are being leveraged, so that you can start understanding, in your particular industry, how you're using particular objects and maybe other people are using other objects more prevalently than you are. So you might want to investigate leveraging that. If you dig into even deeper details, you can get a view of all the objects in the org and all the objects that aren't classified in these clouds. And this also shows you where, sort of when those objects were last updated, for example, and obviously all the automations and everything else that's on those particular objects. Another one from that sort of adoption perspective is the concept of licenses. So like, how are you leveraging the licenses in your org? This is it's a really common demand planning scenario that people are going through. So they're trying to understand how the licenses are being utilized, which ones are being assigned and not. Hubbl gives you a great view into this that allows you to understand quickly all of your feature licenses, permission set licenses, and use of the licenses across the org. It's a great question.
That's great. And can I ask another one just on fields as well? So it really sparked my interest. Years ago, I used to use an app to monitor my field usage. But I feel like I could do that with Hubbl now instead.
Yeah, so field utilization is really interesting. So one of the actually starting on this org utilization, a common scenario that people run into is running into org limits from a data storage perspective based on the number of records that are inside of their org. And so what we're doing with field utilization here, you're correct. You can use Hubbl to do your field utilization analysis, and it's incredibly efficient. Like I said, you are not installing an app in your org. You're not creating records. When you run the field utilization, you don't have to create records in your org, which makes you pay more money to Salesforce because you created records in your org. And it's also incredibly time efficient. You don't need to navigate to every single object and run a field utilization against that object. If you wanted to run this particular org, if I clear out of here, this particular org has a huge number of objects in it. So it's got, if I look at the summary, it's got, over 1,000 objects. If you wanted to run field utilization across 1,000 objects, I mean, it would literally take you weeks if you had to click into every single one of them, run those. You can only run a certain amount at a certain time. With Hubbl, it literally takes you 2 minutes to create your account and set up your scan to start monitoring, and it'll monitor it monthly. So not only are you getting field utilization right now, you're getting field utilization over time, so you can actually track and trend that over time. And
I love
there's other. Go ahead.
Dig into it by object as well. I think that's fantastic that you can dig in by object and see the number of fields, things like number of lookups, roll-up summaries, because of course we have these limits as to how many we can have of certain things as well.
Yeah, another really useful scenario is this ability to visualize that concept of scenarios where someone has created a field, has created two fields that have the same label. They have different, in this scenario, they have different types and they have different API names, sort of what we were talking about earlier. And you can see the different utilization across these two individual fields. And this is a really common scenario. You'll get fields coming in from different packages that are filling in. They have the same label as what your custom fields might have, and this allows you to do that visualization across both of those.
So we've got a couple more questions that have come in. Someone has said, it seems like a meta question, is there a way to view Hubbl without leaving Salesforce, for example, through a custom tab, or is it just through the website?
Great question. So Hubbl Diagnostics is not available inside your Salesforce org. It's you're creating a user in a portal, and you can see it's actually built on top of Experience Cloud. So you're viewing the Hubbl Diagnostics results outside of your org. That said, Hubbl Process Analytics is an AppExchange app that you actually use inside of your org. And so that's an app that's allowing you to look at all of the data inside of your orgs for specific processes. Really common use case scenarios are people that are managing a call center, for example, and they're trying to understand how records actually went from open to close and all of the processes that they actually went through with the actual data, and visualizing that in minutes and then doing slices through them. You could even do things like, show me how the sales team in this particular region is processing records versus another, or this particular business unit, and you actually get a visualization of all of that. And that's actually viewed inside of Salesforce directly because it's an AppExchange app.
Thank you, Mike. And one last question then before we go. So we've had a question come in about the cost. Now, we've seen some really fantastic stuff. And I know you mentioned that there's several things that people can get for free. There's a free version and there's a free security review. But of course, some of this will come at a cost. And I'm sure that's all on your website. So over to you.
Yeah, it is for sure. So there is a free version. You can get started right now. You can create an account, get your security scan for free right now, and that's starts at $0. And then what we do is we just step up based on the number of users in your org. So if you have less than 20 users in your org, it's really easy to get started. It's $79 per month, billed annually. For the sort of the mid-market SMB with, say, 250, less than 500 users, it's about $3,000 USD, and then it steps up from there. But I think an important point is that free version. So what I can do is just give you a sense of what is included in that free version, because the free version itself, it will also give you things like that field utilization that we were looking at. And what we do is we give you access to the most important and most frequently used objects in the ecosystem. So the case, account, and the opportunity. And so when we look at the free version of the product, what you'll see that's a little bit different is that you actually get a view where you can see this upgrade scan button here. And you get access to that full summary dashboard. We didn't even talk about the org health score and complexity score straight up, but you get that access to the migration to flow. You get a view of all of your recommendations. And then the theme across all these tabs, you'll get capabilities across all of the tabs. But things like field utilization, you get access to case, account, and opportunity. So you can get your case and account and opportunity field utilization completely for free. And then if you wanted to upgrade, you can upgrade directly in the product via credit card. It's just a simple process there. If your organization requires invoicing, then we're more than happy to go through that scenario as well. One other one that's really important that we actually didn't talk about is this object automation piece. It actually gives you a view across your entire org in a way you've never seen before. So each one of these circles is an object that has automation on it. And the bigger the circle, the more automation on that object. So these are your hotspots, right? So you look at this org, there's tons of stuff going on, but the case object is a real hotspot. Over here, you can see, getting back to that namespace metadata, you can see these blue ones are actually namespace. So this org, it has a huge amount of triggers in it, but most of them are actually coming from install packages, which is interesting in itself. But if you dig into that case object, you can see all of the automations in a single view that allow you to see all the workflows, processes, flows, and triggers in a single view and whether they're active or not. The amount of effort it takes to just build this table itself in terms of queries is just absolutely paramount. And so for you, like just thinking about it from the free perspective versus the paid perspective, this allows you to get access to that type of visibility for a case, account, and opportunity. But most importantly, custom code analysis is free. We want the ecosystem to be secure. Everyone's tired of data breaches and everything else. We need to be able to identify things like SOQL injection issues in our orgs so that that hackers are no longer taking data from our orgs by modifying queries. So that gives you a lens into how the free versus the paid version works. And hopefully that answers your question.
And you're also quite passionate about empowering nonprofits as well. So last question, you offer a nonprofit discount as well. Is that right?
Yeah, we do. So, and like, honestly, we like even back in our Traction on Demand days, we built our business on top of nonprofit. We're a huge impact partner and grew ourselves into the largest nonprofit consultancy in the ecosystem. And so we continue that trend today, providing the nonprofit discount as well. But we also have a program where we're looking to connect nonprofits with volunteers that want to engage with nonprofits as well. And you can dig into that on our website as well. Definitely passionate in that space.
That's fantastic. Thank you, Mike. Well, I think we've come to the end of all of our questions.
And like I said, feel free to reach out to me. Like, more than happy to engage if you want to dig deeper, or if you're just curious about some of the findings that we're seeing inside of these orgs. More than happy to share the benchmark report and everything with you as well. It's been a really fascinating journey for myself. So having consulted for so long and now looking across the ecosystem and all these orgs that we've scanned, we continue to learn new things. And our true goal here is to really build a platform for success for you as a customer to engage not only with your team, but to engage with your consulting partners, engage with Salesforce themselves, so that you can get more success out of the platform, because the platform is so incredibly powerful and there's so much that we could do out here.
Well, thank you so much, Mike. We've just had loads of lovely comments come through about what a fantastic presentation that was. And it really was fascinating information and really useful to hear about especially the free services that Hubbl are offering people to get started. So thank you so much for joining us and for your time today.
Thanks, Christine.
And with that, thank you to everyone that joined, and hopefully we'll see you next time.
Cheers.